The sky was ominously still. The sun barely peered through the thick churning clouds overhead, casting the land in an unnatural twilight. In the distance, the unmistakable screech of a predator echoed through the air. From the brush, the faint rustling sound betrayed the presence of its victim, unaware of the imminent danger. Life in this world was brutal, merciless, and survival was no more than a fragile thread. In the tall grass, a young calf stumbled, its legs shaky and its breathing uneven. Its mother stood nearby, weary and alert, ready to protect it at all costs. But the vultures circled above, their eyes sharp, their patience infinite. The tension was palpable. Each moment passed as a countdown, a quiet before the storm. Survival in this unforgiving land would require more than just instinct. It demanded the will to endure, even when all hope seemed lost. The sound of distant thunder rumbled through the air as the mother moved closer to the calf. Her eyes darted nervously from side to side, her ears twitching at every slight rustle in the grass. The weight of the sky above seemed to press down on her, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The calf, too young to understand the peril around it, continued its awkward steps, oblivious to the dangers lurking nearby. The mother's instincts flared. She knew the vultures would not wait long. Her movements became deliberate, calculated, a silent communication with the young one to move faster, stay closer. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, but there was nowhere to hide. No sanctuary in this barren land, no place where danger could not reach. With each passing moment, the vulture above moved lower, its wings cutting through the air like a shadow descending. The mother's heart raced. She had fought for this life, and she would fight again. The vultures overhead were no longer circling aimlessly. They were drawn to the scent of weakness. The air around the calf felt thicker now, suffocating, as if the world itself conspired against its survival. The mother's steps quickened, her hooves digging into the dry, cracked earth. She would not let her calf fall prey to the vultures, not today. But in this wild, cruel land, every step forward seemed to take them closer to an inevitable end. The calf's frantic breathing echoed in her ears, a reminder of how fragile life truly was. As the vultures descended further, the air became a battlefield. The mother, protective and fierce, was a shield. Yet even she could feel the tightening grip of fate. No amount of courage could stop the vultures from descending. The land, the sky, the vultures, it was all a waiting game, one that would end in survival or death. The mother's movements grew more desperate as the vultures came closer, their sharp silhouettes cutting through the gloom. Her body was a blur of motion, her focus on her calf, who now struggled to stay upright in the heavy winds. The young one was tiring. She could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing on its small frame. Every step seemed harder than the last, but they couldn't stop. Not now. Whoa. The vultures were almost within striking distance. Their descent was slow but deliberate, as if they were savoring the moment before they would swoop down. The mother's instinct screamed at her to run faster, to protect the calf with everything she had. The savannah, once vast and seemingly endless, now felt like an inescapable trap. As the vultures dropped lower, the sound of their wings seemed to grow louder, filling the air with dread. The mother's determination was all that stood between life and death, and the battle had only just begun. The calf's breath came in shallow bursts, its legs barely able to carry it. The mother, her body tense with resolve, glanced back over her shoulder. The vultures were closing in. She knew that if they didn't reach the shelter of the rocks up ahead, the end was near. The ground beneath them seemed to stretch endlessly, and the vultures' shadows darkened as they swooped lower, their wings cutting through the air with terrifying precision. The calf stumbled once more, its body giving way to the fatigue of the journey. The mother, ever watchful, nudged it forward with a gentle but firm push. The rocks were close now, but they might never make it in time. The vultures had no such constraints. Time was running out. The world was still, but for the ever-present rustling of the wind through the grass. Mother, though tired, kept moving, her protective instincts pushing her forward. Her calf, however, was faltering. With each step, its energy drained further, its legs buckling beneath it. The sky remained overcast, as though the very heavens had decided to watch their struggle unfold. They had reached a stretch of sparse trees, their skeletal forms offering no real refuge from the looming vultures. The mother's body was stiff with tension, her eyes scanning the horizon. Behind her, the vultures had not relented. They circled, ever watchful. It was a race against time. She pushed her calf gently forward, her instincts crying out that they had to keep moving. But with every step, the weight of survival grew heavier, the odds less forgiving. The mother's ears flicked at the sound of the wind, a subtle warning that they were not alone. She turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as they met the dark shapes in the sky. The vultures had split into smaller groups now, their movements synchronized and relentless. The calf's breathing grew more labored with each step. Every muscle in the mother's body ached, but she pushed herself forward, refusing to stop. The shelter they had hoped for was still too far away. They would have to keep moving. The vultures had sensed their vulnerability, and there was no escaping the grip of nature's cruel clock. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, with nothing but the occasional tree to break the monotony of the barren earth. They were running out of time. The calf stumbled again, its legs buckling beneath it. The mother halted, her heart pounding as she nudged the calf with her nose, urging it to stand. It was weaker than she had thought. The weight of survival pressed on her, and she felt every moment slipping away. The vultures were no longer circling from above. They were moving lower, closing in like a suffocating cloud. There was no longer any question of whether they would attack, but when. Her own body trembled with exhaustion, but she refused to falter. She looked around once more, searching for some sign of salvation. The horizon was empty. There was nothing but the harsh reality of the savannah, stretching endlessly ahead of them. Every instinct told her to keep running, but she knew the calf would not last much longer. Desperation set in. The mother felt the earth beneath her hooves shift with each passing moment. The vultures were circling, closing in, their shadows casting over the savannah. She knew there was no time left. The calf was barely able to keep its feet, and the mother's own body was beginning to betray her. Yet, she pushed on. It wasn't just her life at stake now, it was the life of her young one, fragile and dependent. She had brought it into this world, and she would not let it fall victim to the vultures. The horizon remained empty, barren, and unyielding. The sky grew darker, as though nature itself had turned against them. With a final determined push, the mother nudged her calf forward, willing it to stand, to survive. But with every step, the vultures moved closer. The vultures were close now. They swooped down, their wings cutting through the air with brutal precision. The mother stood firm, her body poised, but the calf was weakening. She could feel the weight of its breath, heavy and labored. Her eyes met the vultures for a brief moment, a silent understanding between predator and protector. There was no way out. The calf would not survive if she didn't act now. With a final glance at the calf, the mother made her decision. She would not let it die alone. The vultures were descending, and she was ready to fight, to do whatever it took to save her young one. She would face the vultures head-on, no matter the cost. The savannah was a cruel, unforgiving place, but she was its fiercest defender. The mother's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The vultures had retreated for now, but the reprieve was fleeting. The calf's legs were barely holding up, its body weakened by the journey. The mother knew the terrain ahead was unforgiving, with no real shelter in sight. The heat of the day bore down on them, and the savannah was cruel in its emptiness. Her muscles burned with exhaustion, but she refused to slow down. Every step felt like a battle. The vultures would not stop their pursuit. They had shown their patience. The mother's determination only grew as she pushed forward, knowing that if they didn't find some form of shelter, the end would come soon. Survival at this point was a fleeting hope. Yet, she would not surrender. The horizon seemed to stretch on forever, the earth cracked and barren. The mother pushed the calf onward, but with each step, it seemed more unlikely they would find refuge. The vultures, no longer circling, were now gliding at a lower height, almost as if waiting for the right moment. The air felt thick and suffocating, as if the land itself was holding its breath. They could not escape the constant pressure of the chase. With every passing minute, exhaustion began to cloud the mother's thoughts. Her body ached, and the calf, now stumbling more frequently, was the only thing keeping her moving. She could not, would not let it fall. Survival had become a matter of defiance. The air was growing colder, the wind picking up as the vultures began to circle again. The mother's steps faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly regained her footing. The calf's exhaustion was now palpable, each step becoming a painful drag through the dirt. The land ahead was still barren, with no signs of shelter or safety. The vultures were no longer waiting. They were closing in. The silence between each beat of the wind was interrupted only by the sound of the calf's labored breathing. The mother nudged it forward once more, her own strength nearly gone. She could feel the weight of time pressing against her. If they did not find shelter soon, there would be no escape. Nature had set its course, and there was no turning back now. The mother's legs wobbled beneath her, her body screaming for rest. But rest was a luxury she could not afford. The vultures were now circling just above them, their presence undeniable. The calf's breaths were shallow, its pace slowing even further as the heat drained its energy. The land around them seemed to close in, suffocating, as though the earth itself wanted them to stop. The mother could see the vultures' shadows darkening the ground, moving closer with every passing second. There was no place to hide, no escape. The last vestige of hope dwindled with every step. Her only thought now was the calf. She had to keep it moving. It was her only chance at survival. The vultures were closing in, their wings slicing through the air with predatory precision. The calf's legs could no longer hold it steady, and it collapsed onto the ground. The mother, frantic now, rushed to its side, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The vultures were almost upon them, their shadows stretching across the land like a final, inevitable wave. She nuzzled the calf, urging it to rise, to keep moving, but it could barely respond. The land around them was a silent witness to their struggle, the wind carrying the scent of desperation. There was no shelter, no place to hide, and no way to outrun the vultures. She had no choice but to fight for every second, for every breath, with the last of her strength. Just as the vultures were about to strike, the ground beneath them trembled with a low, deep rumble. The vultures froze mid-air, their attention diverted for a moment. In the distance, something was stirring. The mother's eyes flicked nervously toward the sound, her instincts screaming that danger was not just from the vultures. The calf, exhausted and barely conscious, was oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. The earth beneath them was alive with movement. The tremor grew stronger. The vultures hovered, uncertain, as the sky above darkened even further. Something was coming. Something far larger than the vultures. The mother's heart raced, but her determination remained unwavering. Whatever this new threat was, she would fight it just as fiercely. Survival depended on it. The rumbling grew louder, unmistakable now. The mother, her instincts on edge, stepped closer to the calf. She was no longer focused on the vultures, but on the earth-shaking presence now drawing near. The shadows of something large and powerful loomed in the distance, advancing steadily. Her heart pounded as she realized the magnitude of the threat. It was not just the vultures who wanted to claim the calf. The air around them shifted, charged with an undeniable sense of danger. The land itself felt like it was closing in on them. The vultures seemed to retreat momentarily, giving way to the new terror. But the mother remained firm. She had no choice but to face whatever this new predator was. For the calf, she would fight to the end. The silhouette grew clearer as the creature approached. It was enormous, its massive form cutting through the haze. The mother's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure, a predator far larger and more menacing than the vultures. The creature's heavy steps sent ripples through the ground, and its eyes, gleaming with hunger, locked onto the calf. The vultures had fallen silent, sensing the shift in power. The mother stood firm, her body braced for a battle she could not afford to lose. The calf, too weak to stand, could only watch as the beast neared. The predator's presence felt like the final verdict, but the mother was not about to surrender without a fight. She was no stranger to the harshness of the savannah, but this was a new level of danger. The predator's pace quickened as it neared, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its fur. The mother, her heart pounding in her chest, had no choice but to make a stand. Her eyes met the predator's, a silent understanding passing between them. This would not be an easy fight. Her body screamed for rest, but she ignored it. The predator's jaws parted slightly, its teeth gleaming as it prepared to strike. The vultures, still hovering above, remained silent, their sharp eyes trained on the unfolding scene. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of the savannah's harsh realities. The mother stood her ground, her every instinct telling her to protect her calf at all costs. She knew the battle for survival was never easy, but this would be the most difficult challenge she had faced yet. The battle had begun. The predator lunged forward, its massive form cutting through the air with terrifying speed. The mother leaped to intercept, her hooves striking the ground with a force that sent dust flying. She fought, not just for her own life, but for the life of her calf. The predator's jaws snapped shut, but the mother was quick, dodging its attack with a grace that belied her exhaustion. Every movement was calculated, her body pushed to its limits. The calf, too weak to rise, watched helplessly. The vultures above seemed to hang still in the air, as if time itself had slowed. The fight for survival had reached its peak. There would be no second chances. The mother's heart raced, her every instinct telling her to fight until the very end. The predator's jaws snapped shut with an ear-splitting crack, missing the mother by inches. Her heart raced, adrenaline surging as she pivoted to the side. The ground beneath her hooves cracked as she dodged another blow, the predator's sharp claws slashing the air. She could feel the weight of the moment. This was the climax of their struggle. Every muscle in her body screamed for respite, but there was no time for weakness. The calf lay motionless behind her, its breath shallow, but she would not let it fall. The predator was relentless, its movements quick and brutal. The vultures, once silent observers, now seemed to edge closer, drawn by the sounds of the battle. The mother's eyes locked onto the predator, determination burning in her gaze. If she fell, the calf would not survive. The time for mercy had passed. This was a fight to the death. The mother's legs burned with fatigue, but she refused to let the predator gain an inch. Her hooves struck the ground with power, sending tremors through the earth. Each move was precise, each step a fight for survival. She managed to land a blow on the predator's side, causing it to stagger back. For a moment, the predator faltered, its eyes narrowing in irritation. The mother seized the opportunity, pushing forward, her body moving with a ferocity that only a mother could summon. She could feel the presence of the vultures above, still waiting for the moment of weakness. The fight was far from over, but this was her only chance. She had no choice but to go all in and hope for the strength to end it now. The predator's eyes flashed with renewed rage as it lunged again, more ferocious than before. The mother sidestepped just in time, but the predator's claws scraped her side. Pain shot through her body, but it was nothing compared to the fear of losing her calf. Her vision blurred with the intensity of the moment, but she focused on the one thing that mattered, her calf's survival. The predator was faster, more vicious, but the mother was relentless. She managed another blow, this time striking the predator's face. The creature reeled back, momentarily disoriented. The vultures, sensing their opportunity, began to dive closer. But the mother wasn't finished yet. She gritted her teeth and prepared for another round of battle. The predator, now growing desperate, took a more calculated approach. It circled the mother, its eyes darting between her and the calf, weighing its options. The vultures seemed to hang in the air, as if waiting for the final move. The mother, her body battered and bruised, could feel herself weakening. Every breath was a struggle, and each movement brought pain. But the thought of her calf, so vulnerable and helpless, kept her fighting. The predator lunged again, faster than before. She could feel its breath on her face as it closed in. But the mother was ready. With a sudden explosive move, she threw her full weight into the predator's side, sending it crashing to the ground. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The predator lay still, its massive body sprawled on the ground, breathing heavily but defeated. The mother stood over it, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her body unwavering. She had won. For now at least. The vultures, sensing the change in power, hesitated in the sky, reluctant to approach. The mother turned her gaze to her calf, still lying motionless on the ground. She took a few tentative steps toward it, her body trembling with relief and fatigue. The fight had drained her, but the survival of her young was all that mattered. She nuzzled the calf gently, urging it to rise. The savannah was harsh, unforgiving, but the mother's resilience had triumphed over the odds. The battle was won, but the war for survival was far from over. The dust had settled, the predator's body now a lifeless heap on the cracked earth. The mother stood over it, her body battered and bloodied, but her spirit unbroken. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she slowly turned towards the calf. The fight had taken everything from her, yet she was still standing. The vultures, now distant, circled in the sky, their attention diverted elsewhere. Her legs were shaky, but she took a step forward, slowly, cautiously, until she reached the calf. The young one's eyes were barely open, but it stirred slightly at her touch. The mother nuzzled it gently, her eyes filled with an overwhelming sense of both relief and sorrow. There was no celebration in victory, only the raw, quiet aftermath of survival. The savannah was harsh, and the battle was won, but the struggle was far from over. The mother knew the land would not yield, but she had one more fight to win, to guide her calf to safety. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant calls of the few remaining vultures. The mother's legs were weak, and each step she took was a reminder of the battle she had fought, and the toll it had taken. She nudged the calf once more, urging it to move, but it struggled to rise. The journey was not over. The harsh savannah stretched endlessly in front of them, an unforgiving expanse of dust and dry grass. Yet, despite the odds, the mother's heart still beat with fierce determination. She would not leave her calf behind. Together they would find shelter, they would survive, no matter how long it took. Her eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of refuge, but all that met her gaze was emptiness. Still, she moved forward, step by painful step. The savannah had not broken her, and it would not take her calf. The mother's pace was slow but steady, her determination pushing her forward despite the weight of fatigue. Each step was a small victory, but with every passing moment, she could feel the strength of the land's indifference. The calf, though still weak, had managed to stand on shaky legs. It moved beside her, following the trail she blazed, but the journey was far from easy. The vultures had finally scattered, but the threat was not gone. The land would challenge them at every turn. The mother could sense it, the wind had shifted, and the air felt heavy with something new. The days ahead would not be kind, but she could feel the strength in her bond with the calf. Together, they would face whatever came next. The savannah had tested her, but she had not broken. And neither would her calf. Nightfall approached, and the cold began to seep into the savannah, a stark contrast to the blistering heat of the day. The mother knew they needed shelter, but the land offered no refuge. The dark horizon stretched endlessly before them, offering no signs of life, only the echo of their steps. She could feel the exhaustion in her bones, the toll of the battle, and the long journey. The calf stumbled once more, its legs buckling, but the mother was quick to catch it, holding it steady with a gentle nudge. The savannah had been unrelenting, but she would not let the night claim them. She pressed forward, determined to find safety before the cold took its toll. The land was harsh, but she had learned its rhythm. As long as the calf survived, she would carry on. The night had fallen fully, and the cold was biting. The mother pressed on, the dark landscape stretching endlessly before her. Her body was ached, and the calf's steps grew slower by the minute. She could hear the soft sounds of the savannah at night, the rustling of distant creatures, the sound of the wind through the grass, but nothing that offered comfort. They had survived the day, but the night was just as dangerous. Every step was a fight for survival, and every moment that passed felt like a precious gift. The calf, exhausted, stumbled again, but this time it did not get back up. The mother stopped, her heart sinking as she looked down at the still body of her calf. She had fought so hard, but this was the ultimate test. She nudged the calf once more, desperation creeping into her heart, but it remained still. The battle for survival had been long, but now, the final test would come. The cold night pressed down on them, the wind biting into their already battered bodies. The mother, her heart heavy, looked down at the still form of her calf. There was no movement. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Her instincts screamed to keep pushing forward, to find shelter, to keep moving. But there was no shelter in sight. The savannah stretched endlessly before her, a barren, unforgiving world. The calf had not responded to her touch. She nudged it again, but the silence was deafening. It was as if the land had claimed its own, swallowing up all hope. Tears, unbidden, welled up in the mother's eyes, yet she didn't move. There was no time to grieve. Not yet. She needed to survive, but for the first time, she questioned if she could. The savannah had tested her to the limits of her endurance, and now, it was testing her in ways she had never imagined. She had fought for this life, but now it seemed like the battle was over. The wind howled through the empty savannah, but the mother remained by the calf's side, unwilling to move. Her body shook with exhaustion, but her will was unwavering. She had fought so hard to keep her young one alive, and now, as it lay before her, she realized that survival was never guaranteed. The land had no mercy. The vultures had circled above them, and now they were gone. The silence in the air felt heavier than any predator. Her heart ached, the weight of loss pressing down on her chest. But as the wind shifted, something inside her stirred. She had no choice but to keep moving. For the calf, for the life that had been, she would keep moving. She stood slowly, legs weak and unsteady, but she pushed herself forward. The journey was not over. The savannah had claimed many, but it would not claim her. Not yet. The night seemed endless, each step heavier than the last. The mother's body screamed for rest, but there was no time. She kept moving, her thoughts clouded with both grief and determination. The land, once harsh and unforgiving, now seemed even more so. She had walked the savannah's long stretch before, but this time the weight of solitude felt more profound. There was no answer from the wind, no comfort from the land. The vultures had disappeared, but the sense of impending doom still lingered. Each step she took was a defiance, a refusal to succumb to the world's harshness. She was alone, but not defeated. She had survived the battle for the calf's life, but now she faced a different kind of battle, the fight to keep going. And she would fight, even in the silence. The hours passed, though it felt like days. The land beneath her hooves was no longer just earth. It felt like a reflection of the battle within her. She was weary, but her spirit refused to yield. Calf was gone, but the fight to survive was still alive within her. Her muscles ached, but her heart burned with an unshakable resolve. The savannah had taken its toll, but she had learned to endure. The silence around her felt deafening, but there was still something she could do. She could survive. As the horizon began to lighten, she pushed forward, step by painful step, refusing to stop, refusing to give up. The savannah had tested her, but the final test was one of will. And she would win. The dawn broke, and with it, a new day. The mother stood at the edge of the savannah, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had come so far, and yet the journey felt endless. But the fight had changed her. She had survived the greatest test the land could offer. Her heart was heavy with loss, but her spirit remained intact. The calf was gone, but it was not in vain. The battle for survival had taught her something profound, the strength to endure, no matter the cost. The land was harsh, but it could not claim her will. As the sun rose higher, bathing the savannah in a warm golden light, the mother took a deep breath. The savannah may have taken much, but it could not take her will to survive. She would walk on, not just for herself, but for the memory of the calf.